Welcome to Economics Happy Hour. My name's Matt,
And my name is Jadrian.
and it is early March 2025 as we're recording. Closer to mid-March, I guess, when this is coming. It'll be close to the Ides of March for all of our classic literature friends out there. But
All 12 of them.
all 12 of them, all 12 of the classic lit friends. I am recording this during my spring break. Our Economics of Spring Break podcast came out. Your spring break is about to start when people are listening, right? They will
3 days away. I am
3 days away.
excited when you're listening to this. I will hopefully not be working. I will be reading a book on a couch, but I'll probably be working on something.
Yeah, yeah. But if it's the stuff you like, that's not a bad thing. So, not a bad thing.
Uh, it it's stuff I need to do,
Oh, okay.
and I I sometimes I like it and sometimes I don't.
That's fair. That's fair.
It's
I,
work.
during sabbatical, I have been working
Mhm.
quite a bit, and I was talking to somebody saying, said I've been working just as hard, and then I paused. I'm like, well, no, no. Dean work like I maybe have been putting in 40-hour weeks, maybe.
Yes.
Not 60 or 70 or whatever the insane number is for 15 weeks out of the year. And just like that doesn't sound like a sabbatical. Like that's not what I think of. And I was like, well, it's fun, it's
I
different.
have a podcast that you should listen to.
Yeah,
That's what you should have responded
I
with.
should have. I should have.
You
Could
should
have
have been like, let me tell you about this podcast.
added a customer. But well, you are in the office still,
I am.
so it is not an alcoholic beverage, I assume. What is the drink of the day?
Yes, you're right. So, those of you watching, you can see my nice office background. Those of you listening, I am at work. I had planned to leave early, and then I got that dreaded, can we have a meeting at this time?
Ooh,
Which means I will not be leaving at the time I wanted to leave to get home to have a beer with Matt. So instead, I went to the office fridge. And so if my department chair is listening, I want you to know I stole one of your Coke Zeros
hey,
because I'll replace it later. I needed a beverage, and I've had plenty of water today. So we're going Coke Zero today.
Coke Zero. I am planning actually to work out after this, so I was not getting an alcoholic drink, but I figured I should do something a little bit more interesting. So I made myself a non-alcoholic Moscow Mule
Very
or
cool.
Kiev Mule if we want to depending on your allegiance these days for our listeners. So, but no vodka, not a London Mule with gin. I've been learning about all the
Uh-huh.
variations, but um,
Oh, cheers, Matt. Well, I'll
cheers.
cheers you on a Coke Zero. See if it's. I hope it's cold. I don't. I To be fair, I don't know when they put this in the fridge.
Hopefully it's good.
It's cold enough. It's
Good.
it's office cold. So it is
Office.
clearly
Yeah.
not the temperature that I keep my home fridge at. But it'll suffice for our 45 minutes together.
It'll work. It'll work. And the mule is delicious, and I will be able to work out without having had a drink before, which doesn't seem like a good idea. So happy
So
about that.
let me just check with you before we start. A Moscow Mule normally is ginger beer
Ginger
and
beer
lime
and lime and vodka.
and vodka. Okay, so you have like basically a lime ginger beer.
Correct.
I'm not sure if I've had a ginger beer, just a ginger beer.
I don't know that I have had a ginger beer, just a ginger beer either, actually. I've had
Gotcha.
ginger beer with
With
vodka
lime.
and lime, and then I tried the virgin ones, and I was like, oh,
Okay.
that's not too bad. It's not an everyday thing, but
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I have ginger beer at my house.
okay.
But it's not cold. I'm pretty sure I have it like up on a shelf because normally I pour my mixers over ice, and so I don't
Yeah.
keep them in the fridge.
No, I would say
You're
it's
gonna
a
make me try this.
I would say make it cold. The copper
Okay.
mug always helps. And for a full can, if it's a 12-ounce can of ginger beer, I'd
Hmm.
probably go between an ounce and an ounce and a half of lime juice.
Are you using real lime juice or like the lime syrup juice?
Uh,
I have
I
both.
use
That's what I'm
I use
curious.
whatever I have at my house at the time. So
I mean, I like lime, so I'll
used
put extra in it.
sometimes I've actually used fresh limes and squeezed and throw the lime in, and that's really good. Sometimes it's the syrup. Sometimes it's in this little lime-shaped plastic thing, and I just have to keep squeezing. It's whatever works. Economists were adaptable, right?
No, I'm thinking back to when you said those lime shaped bottles. I'm thinking back to like when we were kids these are the things like I don't know if we've actually talked about this. There are things that I remember from my childhood that were very normal things in my childhood, and now that I'm older, I'm like, were we poor? And those lime and lemon bottles in the fridge, I vividly remember those. I don't remember having fresh limes and lemons as a child. I feel very confident saying I don't think we ever had fresh citrus like that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think we only had the little fake limes and lemons, or like the lime and lemon plastic things.
Honestly, I don't remember the fake plastic things as a kid or fresh ones, but I'm sure we had something. And watermelon, cantaloupe, those kinds of things were a little more common in Minnesota summers.
But in the summer, right? You had them
Apples
seasonally.
everywhere. Apples at the house all the time, but
Yeah.
not as much citrus.
Well,
So,
no, and that's what I'm wondering if, like, when I was a kid, if that really was sort of not that, like, I mean, we obviously traded stuff, but trade has changed dramatically today compared
sure.
to 30 years ago. And so
Yep.
I think 30 years ago, we weren't really importing. I think there was still seasonality at the grocery store. And I'm wondering if, like, we just never had limes and lemons because they were just expensive. It
Hmm.
was before the mafia or the cartels got involved in the limes.
The lime cartel. The lime cartel.
But this is
So
not our topic for today.
this
I
is
should
not
probably
the topic, and
I'm gonna cut in for Matt.
we have asked our loyal listeners for tips and suggestions on episodes. And
And we have one.
we have one. One of my colleagues, shout out to James Palmakowski, who chairs finance and analytics department, teaches data analytics at Susquehanna University. Uh, Asked about doing an episode on the economics of pets and or the economics of pet ownership, somewhere in that space, and thought that sounds interesting. I haven't thought
Yeah.
too much about that, and sounds kind of fun. And I uh, I have a dog. You do not currently have a dog, or
I
no dog.
dog sit. I dog sit regularly.
You dog sit regularly. Uh, Love animals. It's kind of fun. For many who have dogs or cats or anything, right? They are very much a member of the family. So all sorts of interesting economics that we can look at. And we figured we would start. We haven't talked to each other much about our thoughts on this before, other than let's do this episode. But we did say we would kind of start like we did last time
Mhm.
with the question of when you think about the economics of pets or the economics of pet ownership, what comes to mind? And I guess I'll start with that
I would
and
say
let
you go
you.
first because I went first last time. So what
Okay,
comes to mind
I'm
first,
happy.
Matt, when you think of the economics of pets?
So the I have one that's more obvious that I won't say, but one interesting. I'll point out one that came to mind quickly. I don't know that it came to mind first, but I think is
Okay.
somewhat interesting, and I'd love to parse this out a little bit with you, as maybe I'm thinking about this wrong. But I'm wondering about the economic incentives or the economic viability of the adopt, don't shop crowd for pets. There's a vlogger I know in poker who's very big, on dogs. Like he'll often feature himself. He's a poker player, but sometimes go into an animal rescue shelter. It's where some of his
Hmm.
charity money goes, and he'll always say, "Adopt, don't shop." And the economist in me always wonders how well this will actually work, because if you increase the demand for I mean, are we really going to change consumer behavior? There is an incentive to get the pet you might want. There are a number of individuals who can make a living by buying and breeding pets. If people don't buy them, do they mistreat them, right? There's a bit of an ethical, I mean, in many ways, it's
Yeah.
I don't know if it's what we would call a credence good. I mean, you get the dog, and I think about dogs because we have a dog.
Hmm.
You get the dog, and you love the dog. And how was it treated under the people who were breeding the dogs? I went to the place and saw them, and when I saw their kids there and saw the way, boy, I'm pretty confident they really treated our dogs right, and I'm pretty
Yeah.
happy about that. But you don't necessarily know. And
There's an economic concept in here that you're circling around here.
yeah, and so I'm
This
wondering,
this
like,
idea that the buyer doesn't know the full
yeah,
information of
Yeah,
the
yeah, which is even after the good. That's a
yeah.
credence good, right? Is what we would call it. I don't know if you call a pet a good. So there's the credence good aspect of it,
Yeah.
and then there's whether the adopt don't shop will really matter. If you are increasing the odds of people adopting, is is it going to really change consumer behavior where that will decrease the demand for buying pets at a pet store? So you can see I haven't fully formed this, but I
Yeah.
find that market interesting, and I'm not sure if it really will work as well as those who would prefer everybody to adopt might hope it would work.
I hadn't heard the adopt don't shop in the pet store space. I've always heard about it from like basically the puppy mills. The people selling dogs in the corner of the Walmart parking lot. Um where it's not like you had a dog that accidentally gave birth. You are treating the dog as a input to the production of puppies that you're going to sell.
Sure. Yeah.
I've heard about it in that space of the sort of like if you're going to buy one, I've actually heard if you're going to buy one, buy it from a PetSmart. They're more likely to at least be monitored compared to those random people selling them on the side of the street who you really have no idea what they're doing back at home. Like,
I didn't know that people sold them on the side of the street, to be honest. I bought from
yeah.
there was a house and they clearly as their part-time income,
Hmm.
they have a dog and they I think it seemed like they took
Yeah.
good care of the animals and we were pretty happy with that. But
So,
when I think of the term puppy mill, it
yeah,
isn't this house
it's
wasn't
not
what
that.
comes to mind
So
necessarily.
this is awkward that you're going to say this. I made this comment about growing up, and I didn't realize things in life. We that was our family. That's how we made extra income on the side.
That's
Um,
awesome. Yeah.
my parents had, and this is the tough part. I don't have very good memories of childhood. Well, let me. That made it sound like I was abused. That's not what I meant. Um, my memories are not as strong about my
Yeah.
childhood. I have very happy memories. I was a very like I loved being a kid. I don't remember as much, but I know that we raised German shepherds,
Mhm.
and we had female German shepherds, and my parents would find a male, and they would have puppies, and some of the puppies would go to the male owner, and we would sell, but we sold them on the side of the road because our house was up against the highway. We did that with Dalmatians. I don't remember how long we did this, but our family made extra cash selling dogs. But we also sold other animals. I tell this to my
Okay.
friends, and they're just like, "Where did you grow up?" They- They're just so used to suburban life that they don't know what it's like out of the suburbs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I that's tough. So I think about it in the sense that obviously if we were doing something wrong, we lived in a smaller town, but people in town would have known that we were doing something. I think they would have known we were
I
doing
agree.
something wrong if we were doing something wrong.
Yeah.
So when I think like the puppy mill part, I'm thinking the ones that are sort of out in the middle of nowhere. They have 30 dogs that they're like really just sort of a factory of puppies.
Sure.
I don't know though, right? Because in some senses, at least this is the pet store that was in State College. My understanding was that or not pet store, the animal shelter in State College. From what at least they told me, one of their missions was when they sold because they also sold the animals from the pets from their shelter, was that they used the money to then go buy dogs who were in these sort of bad situations and stuff. So like they used the funding for their shelter as a go save dogs from other places and rehome them in the middle
Yeah.
of Pennsylvania. So yeah, I don't know. I hadn't. That's definitely not the first concept that comes to mind on my side.
And I said it wasn't number one,
Yeah.
but it was probably two or three for me. And I just find it interesting. And there's a little bit of interesting economics. Like
Hmm.
are you increasing? Sometimes there could be actions that could be taken that might increase the demand for the puppy mill dogs
Hmm.
inadvertently, right? I don't know exactly what they are, but there are
COVID,
times where
COVID,
there's what?
COVID,
Yeah,
the
there,
pandemic, right?
oh,
The lockdown. Tons of people. They're called pandemic puppies.
pandemic puppies. Yep.
Yeah, they right the shelters based. I don't want to say they got emptied, but people were buying dogs constantly because they were staying at home,
Yeah,
and then once they started to go back to work, they dropped their dog off
which is
at
pretty
back at
terrible.
shelters.
But yeah, the
Yeah.
so you said that wasn't your the first thing that came to mind. So what was the first thing that came to mind for you when we
So
were
let me
saying
start by saying, James, if I assume you're listening to this, one, you spelled my name wrong, but that's perfectly okay. I know who you were talking about. But two, thank you for submitting this question because it's so interesting. Um, Matt's gonna check to see how he spelled my name now. Um,
I
I
didn't know
actually
where this
list.
was, so I
No, it's
don't even know
okay.
where to check. So
I was listening to a podcast. It's an old podcast, but I just listened to it the other day, and it was about this phenomenon of people going into debt for their dogs or for their pets. And I don't know if you've seen this or heard this story before, but basically, we're a lot of us are really attached to our animals,
yeah,
and I don't want to put you on the spot and ask you these same sort of questions, right? But it's the sort of if your dog ends up, it's Millie, right? Is
puzzles.
Puzzles. I don't
Puzzles
know why I
is
said
ours.
Millie. Now I'm very curious whose dog is named Millie. Puzzles. Right. So it's that sort of thing. If Puzzles get sick, you're gonna maybe we think about this in the opportunity cost space too, right? Is if something happens and Puzzles has to go to the vet, what is the price of saving Puzzles? And so this podcast did a really interesting job of talking about this idea that there's pet insurance markets, that people can purchase insurance for their pets to help alleviate unexpected vet bills. But one of the things that was really interesting about it, and I had never known, I knew about pet insurance. I knew that was a thing. Like I never had
Yeah.
it, but I knew it existed. Do you have pet insurance? I guess maybe I should ask
No.
that. Okay.
Nope.
Well, so this is what was really interesting about it was essentially pet insurance today is very similar to health insurance pre-Affordable Care Act. So the pet insurance company can deny your dog coverage for pre-existing conditions. The pet which the pet insurance company can even if you're making payments, they can cancel your policy if they think your pet is too expensive. But it was sort of really interesting to think about. There's a large group of people who are going into debt and taking on basically credit card payments to help fund vet bills for stuff. And they were talking also in the sense on the doctor side that because this is such a what's the best way to describe it? It is a less transparent sort of operation, I guess, compared to like a hospital, in the
Yeah.
sense that vets are treated much more similarly to a restaurant than they are to a hospital because right they
Okay.
have Google reviews and people are leaving star ratings, but if you go to the emergency room, like you're not looking up who your emergency room doctor
You're
is.
just
you're
you're getting who you're getting.
you're
Yeah.
getting whoever's on call, right? But that it's the opposite on pets, that people are looking up
Yeah.
vets. And so what's happening is that there's that's where the podcast is really cool. So if you can find this podcast, it's like loving
Okay.
your pets to debt or something like that. It's they're talking about this idea that vets are so scared of getting bad Google reviews that they're ordering basically tons of unnecessary tests. That's how they make money, but it's also a way to protect yourself from a bad, you can say you tried everything, but that's
Yeah.
also driving people into debt because they're ordering all these tests that aren't really needed and stuff like that. So it was fascinating. My first thought was the pet insurance market because I've been thinking about it for the past 3 days since I listened to that podcast.
Yep. I will ask. So we're talking about going into debt for animals. I could ask you. I don't know if you've looked this up or if you've heard this anywhere, but do you know, according to uh, Petable.com,
Okay.
what does the average new dog owner pay in annual ownership expenses for a
Oh,
dog?
I could venture a guess. New. So this is a brand new dog, right? So this is like the first year of pet ownership because that's obviously more expensive than years 2 and 3 because you got to get shots and stuff like that.
I think you could I think you could go through. There's a number of different estimates out there. So
I
I'll
would
just let
guess.
you come up with it, and I'll give a few different estimates.
My guess is $2,500.
So Petable says the average new dog owner pays 1750,
Okay,
but
I was a
other
little hot. Yeah,
places will range one. Rover.com says between 1,000 and 5,225, which is a
that's too
huge
hot.
range.
That.
Which actually, I think the range is probably
Mhm.
right. I think it's a pretty variable in what people may indeed spend on
So I was
their
thinking
dogs.
2,000 at first, and then when I heard this pet insurance story, I was like, maybe it's more than 2,000. Yeah,
Yeah,
you right. You
so
got to get a lot of. you've got to get them. There's all the warming. Well, it's again what Matt and I said. It's dogs. I'm a dog person. I'm not a cat person.
Yeah.
I don't know how much a cat costs. I would assume a cat is maybe cheaper.
Um,
But
cat, I brought that. I have that
yeah,
up too. Uh, it is cheaper. Do you have, according to the ASPCA,
I
according
trust
to
that one.
Google's AI overview
Oh,
at a
okay, never mind.
minimum. But Google's AI overview has, according to the ASPCA, and they quote a dollar figure for cats, and it is cheaper. You
Twelve
hazard a
hundred.
guess. 634.
Okay, that's more. I was trying to cut it in half, but I was like, it's got to be way less because I don't think the shots for a cat are the same as shots for a dog.
Yeah, and one key aspect of a cat, if you go away for a few days, you can just leave the cat and
Yeah.
the cat's fine. Whereas you can't leave the dog, right? Your boarding expenses, and depending where you are, that can be expensive. Dogs would also have potentially dog walking expenses. If I have a SU alum, and there are a couple of these models came up, but an SU alum who is great, really great guy. He created a company that I was kind of called, it was called Barkley, but it was like
Mhm.
an Uber for dog walkers. And,
That's
so
what
if you're going to
Rover
be
is,
stuck
right?
late
Yeah.
in the office, you could plug it in and somebody could go walk your dog for a
Mm.
half an hour. And that's not cheap though. So there's those expenses. The vet expenses might be pricey too. I mean, I don't know if there's much of a difference. We're in Sealands Grove, things are cheaper here.
Yeah.
Puzzle's got a bunch of shots, $400 bill or so. I think that's
That sounds
probably it.
about what I paid in State College.
Yeah.
It was a few
So,
hundred. Um,
but you do that more than once a year, and then there's dog food, and then leashes, and gotta get the dog toys, and all,
you're not putting
all of the
puzzle.
stuff. It adds up. It adds
You're
up.
not putting puzzles in a boutique dog hotel that has cameras that you can watch and.
We did not do that. We usually the joy of having college students. We've had some good students watch. And one time when we went out of town, one of the students was less than an hour away, and they were willing to take the dog for 10 days.
Mhm.
And I think the parents loved puzzles so much that even if our student's not there, they would actually take the dog if we're gone for a while. So
That was one of the best things is you could get this sounds so exploitative or whatever. Um, yeah, you could get cheap labor off of college students. We would hire them to dog sit and house sit at the same time. We said
yeah,
basically like, well, you could just stay in the house. You don't have to. And they
yeah,
loved it because they, we'd say, hey, you have access to a washer and dryer if you want. You can cook
yeah,
meals here if you'd like. And they were doing it for like $30 a day. It's
yeah.
just like this is a bargain.
Well, I always figured, could I do it for the same price that we would pay to board, which is about $30 a day
Yeah.
at some of the places around here. And but you're right. It's for them. I mean, this is gains from trade. They're probably going through and saying, this is such a scam. I would do this for free. I get to play with the dog. I get to do I get to do the laundry, and I'm getting paid to walk the
Where,
dog. And
where I lived in state, one of the times I lived in state college, well, one of the places I lived in state college was an HOA that also had a pool. And so I said, hey, it comes with pool access in the summer. If you,
yeah,
I go,
it's
and there's no other college students. You have full access to the pool yourself.
gains
I
from
like it.
trade. So,
No, that's interesting, Matt. So the other one I was going to do, I've written about this in my newsletter, and it's one that I know that I'm guilty of, and I don't know if you're guilty of it too with puzzles. Is I'm going to call it conspicuous consumption. Maybe this isn't you. I know you don't like that term. Maybe Amanda's guiltier than I am. Are there things you spend money on puzzles? Some of it is you pay for yourself, but that you want other people to know that you love puzzles as much as you do. I mean, you're not this kind of person. I don't. This is not you. But is there something that Amanda has purchased? Does Puzzles have a dog outfit that Amanda purchases? Puzzles doesn't
no
have
dog
clothes.
outfits.
Has Puzzles had a photo session that?
Nope. Nope. The closest thing might be a collar with the name on it.
Okay,
It's not
I was trying to
conspicuous
think of.
consumption.
Yeah.
Puzzles is a lighter, smaller, 30-pound
Hmm.
schnoodle tan. I would always say it was the white fur, but it's
Yeah.
tan. the most conspicuous consumption is the idea if I take walks, everybody remembers this dog. Like, and they
Yes.
more people know who I am in the neighborhood now because I'm the one with the dog, with the cute little dog.
This is my
and
bad. I don't know any of my neighbors' names, but I know their dogs' names.
yeah. It is. I have gotten to know a lot of my neighbors much better because I see them
Mhm.
when walking the dog, and so I will say that there's probably an extra level of credibility that you do get by having a dog and walking the dog regularly.
Yeah.
You build up goodwill and hopefully not much bad will.
One of the well, speaking of bad will, then that's a nice transition. You walked me right into that. Got two of them on there. The dog story is I think about this. I just finished teaching my externality lesson. It is the I don't know if you use this one in yours. It's sort of the classic positive externality and negative externality of a dog barking. And I love the example just because, and I'll explain it for our listeners too. But I love these sort of weird particular examples where you can basically argue two sides of the same thing. I've always found that really fascinating. I know my students
Sure.
do not find it fascinating. So the story that I'm talking about is in a lot of I don't know if it's in textbooks anymore, but I know it used to be in textbooks. One of the examples they used to give of an externality, which is an externality just means you're doing something and you're either harming or helping someone else. So harming somebody, it's a
Yep.
negative externality. Helping
Yeah.
somebody, it's a positive externality.
Side
And
effect.
in effect, yeah, thank you. And the dog barking example is always the way the question's always set up is a dog barking could be a positive externality. Explain why. And then the other version is a dog could be a negative externality. A dog barking could be a negative externality. Explain why. And I've always loved that ability of economics to be able to
Yeah.
sort of come at two different things. So you could tell people, I think the negative externality part is the easy one. What is a positive externality of a dog barking?
Yeah. Well, if you like dogs, it makes you
No,
smile, right?
no. If somebody's breaking into your house,
Oh, well, that
if the,
too,
I
but
think, well,
I
that's the
own the
story. I think
dog, right?
you got fun barks. I think that's the
Um,
story is always that if there's somebody prowling the neighborhood that's not supposed to be there, a dog barking will alert the neighbors
that yeah.
and save the
Yeah, I
neighborhood.
would think of that internally, right? They say that the bigger threat of a dog is not the bite. It
It's
is that if somebody wants to break into a home, they want it to be quiet and they don't want
mhm.
others to know. I haven't thought of that as the externality, the positive externality. I would think of the positive externality, though. When you walk a dog, some people
Yeah.
just get excited to see the
Yes.
dog, and
Yes.
um, it's puzzles is
They get the benefits of dogs without the cost of the
without
dog.
the costs. Puzzles is very well trained. Like we worked on her when she was young about like I put my hand in her mouth and she won't bite. She just
Mhm.
knows you don't bite. So I'm comfortable with kids of any age and they'll
Yeah.
come up and do you want to pet the dog? And their just face lights with joy, which is, of course, actually a positive externality for me because I'm like, hey, this is pretty cool.
I always think of the things that you could train a dog to do, and then you sort of sit there and go, this this animal that like this is an animal. They could rip my face off. And you're over here like squeezing its cheeks, going, "You're so cute." Like right, or you'll put your face right in front of their face.
Yeah.
Like you will do some stuff that you would not do to any other animal, and
Yeah.
like to a dog.
But
I love it.
the
No, that's a really good example. I hadn't heard that one of
that's a
just
positive.
the happiness that other people get from dogs.
And I would think the biggest negative isn't the dog barking. To me, the biggest negative externality would be when somebody takes the dog
Doesn't
and
clean up.
doesn't clean up after the dog. That to me would be the biggest negative externality. Um,
I can give you another negative externality because the previous dog that I had shed a lot. It was a white haired Chihuahua, and it
yeah.
was shedded so much. The dog hair did not bother me because I loved that dog. I was willing to put up with the cost, but anyone who sat in my car also got the dog hair
Got some
associated with
dog
it.
hair.
Or if you're allergic to dogs, and your friend has a dog, you get your antihistamines if you want to hang out with your friends. So that was always another big one. Is I've had friends who have an allergy to dogs, and so anytime they came over to the house, they struggled for the hour or two that they were in the house.
You know. So I the externalities are pretty cool, right? We talked a
Mhm.
little bit about the idea of the puppy mills and the credence goods and how dogs are purchased, a little bit about the cost of dogs. I wouldn't mind pivoting and thinking about the veterinarians to be as an interesting industry.
Mm.
Like the idea of vets. I've always thought of this as not the highest paid industry, and I actually haven't even looked up to see how much does your average vet make.
I think your
But
local vet does. I don't think they make that much.
no, and
As
this
a
is something.
medical field, I mean, I should be quoting that in the air
Yeah.
like that. It is a medical field, but compared to human doctors, I think it's pretty low. It's well paid, but compared to other doctors, I think it's pretty low.
The Bureau of Labor Statistics says the median salary is
Yeah,
93,800, which,
and they go
is
to
a
vet school
perfectly
for
good salary, but you've
yes,
gone to school for a long time.
they go to vet school. Vet schools are incredibly competitive. There are relatively, I think so. This is something I from coming at Washington State because they had a vet school. I sort of knew a lot of, I knew a shockingly large amount of information about vet schools. To my knowledge, there are very few vet schools in the United States. Um, I don't know. You could look that up. If I remember correctly, there's probably something like 20. Like it's a shockingly small number, because basically like each state has one or two, but not every state has them, and then they're incredibly competitive to the point where if you want to go to vet school, you really do need like a 4.0 GPA because it's not like regular med school where you're taking the MCAT, you prove yourself later sort of thing. Like did you find the number of vet schools there
Yeah,
are?
so summer 2020, 32 American and 5
32.
Canadian vet schools.
I knew it was low. Like
It's
to
not
me
even
that
one
is
per state. It's
it's
not
not
even
going, yeah,
one per
exactly.
state.
So Washington State had the vet school in Washington,
Yeah.
and it's not, I mean, it's not competitive like a normal vet school, but like for context, an economics graduate program, there are like 130 PhD programs for economics. And that's just right. I mean, we're an important field, but vets are also very important. There's to me a shockingly small number of vets that are out there,
Yeah.
especially when you realize that you need vets for pets, obviously, but also there's zoo vets that are helping with zoos. There are vets related to like that work at the USDA. There's vets that work on big farms. Like there are way more vets than your
Yeah.
neighborhood vet.
Looking actually, Bureau of Labor Statistics, the initial overview was lower. Now the median pay, actually, it's 119. I'm not going to call this low anymore. I think this is a pretty decent median pay. I mean, it's still a fair amount of schooling, but that's a good salary. And but doctoral or professional degree, you've gone a long time for
Yeah.
school. If your goal is to make money for that same level of schooling, you can make a lot more money, but you're working with
So,
animals all the
so
time.
I looked this up because you got me curious now. The median annual wage for physicians or surgeons is 239,000. And then they break it down by stuff. So a general pediatrician is the lowest paid doctor, a
Mhm.
medical doctor. They're at 205 is that's
So
what no, it's high. It's a
almost
very
double.
good
Yeah.
salary.
Yep.
Vets make very good salary. But I think vet school is again one of those like I think you go for 5 or 6 years,
And
right? I think
and you may
eight
have to take
actually.
out significant amounts of loans. Yeah, so you're not living, high on the
Yeah, four
hog
and four.
here. If you
Yeah.
especially if you've had to take out 100 plus thousand in loans to pay back when you're starting off your career. That said, it is anticipated to be one of the faster growing
Yeah.
occupations over the
Well,
next decade.
and this was what was really interesting about that insurance one is that it makes very good sense why, but obviously people are willing to pay more money to a medical doctor when there's an emergency. There is this sort of how much are you willing to pay a vet
Yeah,
to do stuff. So I think I'm glad you brought this up. This is a really interesting sort of marginal revenue product type story that they are. I'm not trying to diminish what an actual like what a medical doctor does, but they are saving somebody. There's a surgery, cleanliness, understanding of biology. So maybe their marginal productivity is very similar, but people's willingness to pay is very different for for a pediatric surgeon or a cardiologist than it is for what I'm willing to pay for a CAT scan of a dog.
sure. Yeah. And I remember getting that question when we had a few kids and a dog, and our kids are really, really small. And they're like, what scale is it on how much you're willing to pay to save the dog? Like, Yeah, it's I'm sorry. Like it is not I will do anything to save the dog. It's
Mhm.
just it can't be that way. If that's the only way I own a dog, I guess I don't own a dog anymore. But
So this was always really interesting to me. I'm glad you brought up the vet thing because it is relatively lower paying in the medical field. It's relatively
yeah.
lower paying. Not that, and again, they're not doing the same thing, but sort of the knowledge that you need to get into vet school is very similar to the knowledge you need to take into med school. You need biology, chemistry, physiology. You need all the same sort of pre-classes. I've always been, I've always admired students who tell me they want to be a vet. And I think this goes back to sort of your earlier story about the sort of the credence good idea. I can imagine how a medical doctor, so there's obviously death in both sides of it. People die. The doctors can't save everybody. There is sort of a saving, not being able to save people is tough, but even not being able to save pets, I feel like, and I'm not saying that's harder. I mean, obviously, I've never had a human life in my hand, but in the sense that like you're sort of doing more, you're doing more surgeries, more work with dogs regularly, and there's this sort of idea that like animals die much faster than
Oh
humans
yeah, yeah.
do. Like
Yep.
I
The
feel like
lifespan, right? I
a
mean,
lifespan, right? Like there is that's got to be really tough to be able to bounce between like here's a dog, now we're seeing a cat, later I'm leaving to go
yeah.
see a horse. Like
It could be
it's
tough,
interesting. Like
but yeah, I agree. I think it's fascinating. I see the wage, and it is higher than I thought it was to be.
mhm.
It's lower. It's
Hmm.
far lower than physicians, but it is. But part of why, well, a lot of people growing up would think, "Oh, I would love to be a veterinarian and help animals,"
Help it.
and because
It's
of
a
that, of
yes.
course, you would think the supply might be a little bit larger, and as we talk about compensating wage differentials,
Hmm.
they can be a higher wage for more dangerous or less pleasant work, but
Yeah.
it can be a lower wage for either less dangerous or very, very rewarding work. And I think part of the reason the wages aren't higher is it is seen by so many as just an incredibly rewarding career.
And I've heard it is a more comfortable job in the sense that like you really can sort of work 8 to 5. Your vet
That makes sense.
has
Yeah.
office hours
Yep.
versus a general practitioner, your local family doctor has set hours as well, but that's part of why they're one of the
Yeah.
lower paid portions. But then also, no, that's it's fascinating. It is this sort of you're helping, so you don't get as much money.
Yeah.
But
So
at the same time,
it's
people aren't willing to
interesting.
pay a ton of money to save a dog, but they're gonna pay a lot of money to save their kid,
Yeah. Yeah.
which
So
they should. They
all sorts of
should.
things.
In,
So
in case I need to say that, they should. That is a very normal thing for
we
people to
should
do.
be,
Like,
yeah. Save the children. Save the
yes,
children.
we're
So
gonna get all these comments about like Matt and
big
Jadrian would rather save dogs than babies.
one thing I'll be curious about, right? We had this idea and we came up with a few things for our listeners. Did we
Mhm.
miss any interesting economic concepts? Please leave a comment or let us know if we
Yeah.
missed anything. Any final pet related economics before we get to the pop culture for the day?
No, I was trying to mentally. I was already jumping ahead to pets. Um, I probably should have prepped a little better on the pet side of things for if I had a pop culture pet related thing, but I don't think I'm going to.
I'm not going to either, so I could go or I could start or I have one in mind that's just current if you need more time.
No, I found something on the Econ Media Library that I'm happy to go with. So
Go for it.
mine it will be dog related though. So
Awesome. Awesome.
yeah.
Go for it.
Okay. So I'm gonna there's actually I searched pet and nothing came up at first. And then I found two and then I searched dog and I got better things. They're actually both really good. I think I'm gonna go with this ad. I think this ad is really funny. So the ad it's
Okay.
a TV ad. It is called Every Home Needs a Harvey. Have you heard this? Have you seen this ad or no?
I don't think I have.
So it is the so it's these it goes back to the animal shelter version. These people are going like there's it's a dog that's in an animal shelter and people are like coming into the animal shelter and they're like looking at all the different dogs, and they see Harvey and they don't like Harvey at first, and then Harvey basically gets the idea that he needs to set himself apart from all these other dogs because he's clearly not. Nobody wants to pick Harvey. And so the story is basically every home needs a Harvey. And so there's these like basically Harvey creates this video of himself, like he brings you slippers and he can iron clothes and he can mow the yard. And so he's sort of the idea is he's differentiating himself from all the other dogs. And the ad is for this idea. It's a marketing company that you need to pick a company that can differentiate your product just like Harvey does. And so it's a fun sort of product differentiation. How do you set
Yeah.
yourself apart? Things like that.
Oh, well, when we are reviewing this, by the time everybody else listens to this, I will have seen this. So I'm looking forward to watching that, and we'll put that into the show notes.
Yeah.
I don't have a dog related one. I have one on a current show that's right in the midst of running, and it's 1923, which stars Harrison Ford and Helen
Okay.
Mirren. And
I saw your newsletter about this.
yeah, and part of what's interesting about that is it's about almost exactly 100 years ago. And so
Mhm.
there's a couple different things. One is just simply some guy gets paid for a fight, and how much was how much is $420 from 100 years ago worth today? And that's kind of fascinating
Mhm.
to just think
Yeah.
about. But the other there's a time where they talk about Helen Mirren's character asks Harrison Ford's, "Did you know that our neighbors have a telephone in their home? So when he travels, he can spend a nickel and call, and she'll know he got there instead of worrying the whole time." And there's a different scene in the season one where they are shown a washing machine and a refrigerator, and these new
Those are
things
great.
like, and so it's fun to think through economic growth, new inventions, all of the
Yeah.
stuff, and the fact that it's almost exactly 100 years ago makes it even a little bit more fun.
I like it. That's fun.
So well, sorry that you couldn't be at home enjoying an adult beverage during this conversation,
That's
but
what I'm gonna have on the drive home. So,
you're
or no,
gonna
I'm not
have
gonna
a
have it on
beer
the
on the
drive home.
drive home.
Sorry. This episode's gonna get me in so much trouble. I'm gonna drive home, and then as soon as I am done driving home, I will crack one open and tag you in it on Untapped.
Nice, nice. I might try to do the same later. It is nice enough for me to be able to grill tonight for the first
Hmm.
time, so I'm gonna make some
I might
burgers
do
for
that too.
supper. So,
It's not a bad
but
idea.
well, thank you to everybody for listening, and thanks again to James for the recommendation.
Yes.
If you have topics you'd like to hear us discuss, shoot us a comment, an email, a text, and we're always looking for great ideas.
Absolutely.
Well, until next time,
All right. Cheers, Matt.
cheers.
Got about half of it done.